Good afternoon and Happy New Year, everyone. At this time, I'd like to call to order the January 18th, 2024 regular meeting of the North County Transit District Board of Directors. At our December meeting, we welcomed two new board members, Rick Robinson, representing Oceanside, and Kent Lee from San Diego. Today, please join me in welcoming Tracy Martinez, our newly appointed representative for the city of Del Mar. Welcome, Tracy. Great to have you aboard. As a brief reminder for members of the public who may be viewing the meeting on the district's YouTube page, please note that in order to make a public comment during the meeting, you must connect to the meeting using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. In addition, you must also register by sending an email containing your name, me a wink, and wait until called upon to speak. And finally, I've been asked to remind everyone that when it is your time to speak, please remember to turn on and speak into your microphone. This will ensure that your comments are heard by those participating remotely and that they are also preserved for the record. The first item on today's agenda is an overview of the FY 2023 financial audit and annual comprehensive financial report, or ACFR for those who prefer acronyms. Our Chief Financial Officer, Yoon Park Lynch, and Roger Alfaro,
Yes.
partner from Eide Bailey, NCTD's external audit firm, will be presenting this item. Yoon, and I assume Roger is remote?
That is correct.
The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, board members. I am pleased to introduce Roger Alfaro. He is the partner at Eide Bailey. His firm was in charge of performing the financial audit for NCTD, and he will be presenting the results of that audit.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Roger Alfaro. I am a partner with the firm of Eide Bailey, and I had the lead responsibility for the audit for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2023. Next slide, please. Our firm was retained to perform the audit of the annual comprehensive financial report. I'll refer to it as annual report or financial statements throughout this presentation. And as part of our scope, we're conducting the audit of that annual report, as well as issuing our reports on internal control over financial reporting on compliance in accordance with government auditing standards. And in addition to that, as the district receives a significant amount of federal awards and the expenditures exceeded $750,000 for the current fiscal year, it was required to undergo what's referred to as a single audit, which is an audit of compliance over major federal programs. Next slide, please. As your independent external auditor, our responsibility is to form and express an opinion as to whether the financial statements are fairly presented. Those financial statements are prepared by management. Management accepts all responsibilities for the financial statements with the oversight of the board. Our charge is to determine whether those financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with the generally accepted accounting principles in the United States. In addition, as part of the single audit, our responsibility is to express an opinion as to whether the district complied with those compliance requirements which are described in the Office of Management Budget Compliance Supplement. I'll refer to that as just the federal requirements, and issue an opinion in accordance with those requirements. Based on the inherent limitations of internal control, as well as the inherent nature of an audit, the audit process provides reasonable assurance that the financial statements are fairly presented. Alternatively stated, the audit is not a guarantee that all material misstatements will be detected when they exist, even though the audit is performed in accordance with professional standards. And then lastly, we do issue our reports on our consideration of internal control. One thing I want to highlight is that the considerations related to internal control are solely for planning the audit, and we do not express any assurance with respect to the internal control. Next slide, please. Based on the evidence that we gathered for the fiscal year, we have issued an unmodified opinion on the annual report. That is the highest level of assurance the district can achieve in the financial statement audit process. Our report did identify what's referred to as an emphasis of matter. And what that's doing is highlighting to the board as well as users of the financial statements that the district adopted a new accounting pronouncement, and that was required for this fiscal year's audit. And since the district did adopt it and it had an impact on the financial presentation, we're required to call that out to you. We are, in our government audit standards report, we did not report any material weaknesses in the internal control as it relates to our work, nor did we identify any instances of non-compliance. With respect to the single audit, we did audit the federal program that we identified as the Federal Transit Cluster, and we have issued an unmodified opinion on compliance, indicating that the district has complied with those directive material provisions related to the terms and conditions of that program. And further, no material weaknesses were reported based on our audit results. Next slide, please. We have, as your independent auditors, complied with all the relevant ethical requirements regarding independence. And then as part of the qualitative communications with respect to the financial statements, we call your attention to note 1 in the financial statements that highlights the district's summary of significant accounting policies. That provides it the basis or the framework for how transactions are recorded within the financial statements. So we bring that to your attention. And then, as I stated a little bit earlier, the district adopted a new accounting pronouncement with respect to recording transactions related to subscription IT arrangements similar to leases, and that's disclosed in notes 1, 2, and 11 within the financial statements. As we plan the audit, there are certain areas that have a potential for a high level of misstatement within the financial statement process. As external auditors, we refer to those as significant risks, and therefore we have to consider and develop specific audit procedures to address these items. Every audit has a significant risk, and For the district, we identified the potential for management override of internal control, revenue recognition, as well as the implementation of the new accounting pronouncement related to subscription-based IT arrangements as significant risks in the audit this year. Accordingly, we developed our audit procedures, performed testing over those areas, and again, we were able to gather sufficient evidence to be able to issue the opinion, which, as previously stated, is unmodified, which is the highest level of assurance. Next slide, please. As part of the audit process, we call to your attention that the financial statements contain a variety of estimates, and that is required in accordance with accounting principles here in the United States. Certain estimates are considered significant estimates because of the nature of the assumptions or information that go into those estimates could change markedly in future periods. We've identified the estimates associated with fair value of interest rate swaps, the net pension liability, and other post-employment benefits liability as significant estimates. And then the related disclosures to those are considered sensitive disclosures as well. So we draw your attention to that information. As part of the audit process, we, when working with management and performing our tests, to the extent that we have differences from the audit procedure to what's recorded in the financial statements, we discuss those with management. Certain items are considered uncorrected misstatements, or we often refer to them as well as past audit differences. And in this year's audit, we did identify an adjustment in the amount of 1.1 million that needed to be recorded to the cash and investment balances as of year end. We discussed that information or that adjustment with management. Management determined that it was immaterial to the financial statements taken as a whole. As the external auditors, we concur that it is immaterial to the financial statements as a whole, and therefore, from a transparency perspective, we highlight this to your attention. The one thing I did want to note is that the item that we identified as the uncorrected misstatement refers to a valuation item for financial statement presentation. Cash and investments at year end are recorded to be presented in the financial statements at fair value, although the district on a normal ongoing basis purchases or moves money into the county pool and LAIF on the basis of $1 and makes withdrawals on the basis of $1. And therefore, any transactions that are done aren't necessarily done at fair value. The reason I highlight that is the nature of this item is a financial reporting item in terms of recognizing those cash and investments at fair value, not in the sense that are any funds missing. Again, it's truly a financial presentation item. Next slide, please. As part of the audit process, management informed us, and to our knowledge, there have been no consultations with any other accountants regarding accounting or auditing matters. And we're pleased to report that we did not encounter any significant difficulties in dealing with management, nor were there any disagreements that arose during the course of the audit. We appreciate management being open, professional, and providing us access to individuals within the organization, records, as well as access to third parties for us to be able to complete our field work. That concludes my remarks, and I would be happy to address any questions.
Thank you. Yoon, do you have anything to add?
No, thank you.
Okay.
But I'm available to answer any questions as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yoon, Roger, thank you again for that detailed presentation. It's always a pleasure to receive a clean audit with no material deficiencies identified. That said, I expect my colleagues may have a few questions for you. But before we move to board questions and comments, Suhel, are there any public comments or speakers on this item?
Yes, Madam Chair, there was one public comment related to agenda item 1 that was also sent to the board prior to the meeting and posted on the NCTD website for public inspection.
Thank you very much. At this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. Time for board comments or questions. I see Board Member Jenkins.
Thank you. I have several questions. On page 2, where you talked about the internal controls, I understand auditors don't typically look at that, but I believe Lori and her staff look at some of our internal controls. Would that include any of the financial type controls, or would those be outside of the financial controls?
Thank you. Yes. So under the internal audit program, we do review we being the Office of General Counsel, we do review the internal controls related to certain areas of interest. And so the PAF committee selects 1 to 2 areas every year that we will look at. And part of that is looking at the internal controls and the relationship between different divisions and access and so forth.
Okay, and that's outside of the financial department, so it's they're not looking within.
That's correct. So it's
outside set of eyes.
exactly. It's done through the Office of General Counsel through our
Right.
compliance element. And if you might remember, we also had a financial management and oversight review last year by the FTA, and they looked at a lot of the internal controls completely externally as well.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 4, it talked about there were a couple of words in here that kind of gave me a little pause. Significant risks identified gave me a little pause. I understand that those areas were tested. Are we doing anything different in the upcoming year as a result of identifying this situation?
So I will allow Roger to respond, but those significant risks are risks that the auditors consider from the planning standpoint for the audit, but they did not audit those risks.
Okay,
It's for use for planning purposes. So I do want to point out, for example, manager override is really an inherent risk that most organizations have. Basically, what it is there's always a risk that even if you have the best internal controls in place, if management decides to override those controls, they could. So when they are planning their audit procedures, they have to consider all those risk factors to make sure that they properly plan the audit.
okay, so if something was overridden by management, how would the board know that?
Roger, do you want me to answer that, or would you like to answer that question from the audit standpoint?
You can answer that from the management standpoint, and then I can answer it from the audit perspective.
Okay, so within the, what I can say is from the internal control standpoint from the finance division, one of the areas that we pay a lot of attention is related to segregation of duties, meaning that we ensure that our roles and responsibilities are properly divided, and there's not a single point where one person could potentially override controls. As an example, for recording transactions, every financial transaction has to be entered by one individual and approved by a manager or second individual. So that way, what we do is that we run reporting, we review transactions, we double check who entered them, who posted them. Same thing as we make payments, we ensure that the group of people that's responsible for approving invoices, there's proper approvals, and we have a different group of staff within the finance division that's responsible for running the check runs. So so in that sense, we make sure that there's always 2 roles. Now, what I can also let you know is that in any organization, when there's collusion, meaning that when there are 2 individuals that jointly plan to commit fraud, it can happen, and it's not unique to NCTD, right? Because again, you're trying to segregate functions as much as you want. So if there were manager override or controls, you could or could not catch them in a timely manner if there's collusion among staff. Now, what I can say is that we have designed our controls in place to make sure that doesn't happen. But again, if there's 2 individuals that decided to join, and commit fraud, there's always a risk.
Okay. And then the uncorrected misstatement. So if I understand this correctly, this was a past audit difference that we hadn't corrected. Can you explain that?
So what that means, this is it's a past journal entry, which is a proposed entry provided by the auditors. but internally, there it was passed. It was not booked in our accounting records. Like Roger mentioned earlier, that entry is really an entry for fair reporting of our investments in our books. It doesn't really have a cash impact. It's not material, meaning that it is not a large amount in the context of the entirety of our financial statements. But that's really what it means pass. I mean, it's an entry that could have been booked, but we decided not to book it, and the auditors agree that it was not significant to our financials.
Okay. And Roger, what is the significant dollar threshold amount that you came up with for being material, just overall as for this size organization? Is it $1 million? Is it 100,000? What is it?
It ranges based on the risk assessment and the engagement. It's generally a fraction of a percent. So we're planning the audit at that threshold. When we first we discussed this item with management, understood the impact as to why it wasn't recorded or why it isn't recorded. And at the same time, we evaluate it. And so from just from a perspective of context, this item represents 11 hundredths of 1%. So it's a very small dollar amount in the context of the overall assets of the organization. But again, if we identify any differences, we evaluate them and again report them to this board so that there is that transparency in the audit process.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any other questions? Board Member Hensy?
Yeah, just piggybacking on Board Member Jenkins' questions. So both the topics that she rose, I'm curious to know if we'll continue to see these in every audit or if we'll be changing our practices because there might be a better way to handle the risks and then the misstatement.
So the risks from the audit standpoint, those are determined by the auditors for planning the audit purposes. What I can say is the reason that we have unrealized losses is really caused by rising interest rates in the marketplace. So it's a fair value adjustment. So for every dollar that we invest in the LAIF or in the county, we expect to get $1 back plus any interest that we've earned on those funds. Now, let's say in 1 year or 2 years from now, market rates drop, then it's going to reverse. It's going to go the other way around, which means it's unrealized gains, which again is a fair value reporting. It doesn't mean that when we go and withdraw funds from the county that we're going to get more funds. It's still going to be $1 plus accrued interest. So from the reality standpoint, the withdrawal is going to remain the same, whether there's realized or whether there's unrealized gains or losses, but that entry is for book purposes. And the reason that management would decide not to book it is because we believe that internally it could be misleading because it could give the appearance that we have those investments, but we don't, because if we're to make those withdrawals, we will not get the cash. It's really truly a book entry.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. And then the three risks that were identified, just will we implement any changes to that or from time to time we'll continue to see, these are risks. This is something that the auditors identified.
So what I can say is that for someone that has some auditing background, I was an auditor for 9 years, so I have some public accounting experience. In every client that I had, management override and revenue recognition is always a risk. It's almost even codified within the standards. Now, other risks could be more specific to each organization, depending on their type of activity, their business type, the different sources of revenue. But again, the auditors, I'll allow you to speak as well on this one, Roger. But I would say that if there's new accounting pronouncement, that could become a new risk because that's something that was not there before. But I would say that more than likely, management override and revenue recognition will always be a risk every year in every audit.
I see. Thanks for taking the time to explain.
Will you agree with that, Roger? Just want to make sure that I'm not speaking for you.
Yes, just to add on, management override and revenue recognition are from a professional standards standpoint, considered significant risks. And then every year, as the external auditor, we come in and we'll revisit the risks of the organization. There's some inherent risks that we're always testing for. For example, making sure that cash is properly reconciled in the bank. There's a number of different risks that are addressed in the audit, but from the significant risk standpoint, two of those, revenue recognition and management override, you would expect to see. And then depending on whether there's changes in the organization, new transactions, adoptions of new accounting pronouncements, those are things that inherently have a higher possibility that they could be misstated. And so from an audit standards perspective, those are things that we revisit annually and design audit procedures specifically to address that risk for that year.
Okay, thank you for that level of detail. Overall, really great audit, and thanks for everybody's hard work.
I also wanted to, if I'm allowed, I wanted to extend really my gratitude to the finance division, who was really supportive to make sure, along with iBailey, to make this audit happen. And I want to give special credit to my controller, Kevin Lang, for being one of the meetings of this audit. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I did kind of have a question or just to confirm that among the significant risks, there was discussion about OPEB liability. And to me, having been through my own jurisdictions audits, it seems that that's a significant risk that's in line with most jurisdictions, that we all risk changes in interest rates and whatnot.
Right, and for the most part, the risk associated with the pension liability is more from an accounting estimate standpoint, because there's so many estimates that come into play when you're trying to CalPERS prepares those annual valuations every year, but there is a lot of assumptions related to mortality, to payroll growth, to wage growth, to discount rates, investment return. So they have a high risk of from an estimate standpoint. Because again, if there's 1% change on the interest rates, it could have a significant impact on the financial statements. So yes, it's not as much from a risk standpoint, but definitely it's more from the valuation standpoint, which has significant estimates built into that calculation.
Well, thank you for confirming that.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. This was a purely informational item, so there's no vote required. Next, we move to minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes? And thank you, Yoon.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, Roger. May I have a motion to approve the minutes for the December 21st, 2023 regular board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Jenkins. I think I heard Hensy first, second by Hensy. Can you please call the vote?
Yes. Board Chair Edson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Rapatel,
Yes.
Board Member Martinez. Thank you. Board Member Hensy,
Yes.
Board Member Garcia,
Yes.
Board Member Robinson,
Yes.
Board Member Lee, Board Member Desmond, Board Member Jenkins,
Yes.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
On the motion of Board Member Jenkins, seconded by Board Member Hensy to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of December 21, 2023. Motion passes. Board Member Martinez abstain, Board Member Lee and Desmond absent.
Thank you. Next, we have 14 members on 14 items on consent today. Suhail, have any members of the public requested that any consent items be pulled?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Do any board members request any items be pulled? Board Member Contreras.
Item 12, please. Thank you.
Item 3.
Okay, so we will then ask for a motion to approve consent item 2, items 4 through 11, and items 13 through 15.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bhat Patel, second by Jenkins. Please call the vote.
Board Chair Edson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Patel,
Yes.
Board Member Martinez,
Yes.
Board Member Hensy,
Yes.
Board Member Garcia,
Aye.
Board Member Robinson.
Yes.
Board Member Lee, Board Member Desmond, Board Member Jenkins,
Yes.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
On the motion of Vice Chair Patel, seconded by Board Member Jenkins to approve consent items 2, 4 through 11, and 13 through 15, motion passes. Board Member Lee and Desmond absent.
Thank you. Items 12 and 3 will be trailed to the end of the agenda. Before moving on, I just wanted to take a moment to share that it's been a joy and a privilege and an education being on the board of NCTD these past 7 years, and a pleasure serving as your chair for the past 2. Regardless of what have been considered historically challenging times, the board and staff have worked hand in hand to, among other things, improve both frequency and reliability, undertake strong equity moves, practice prudent financial and fiscal management, update the district's website, ticketing and wayfinding, and to pursue and create new and inventive pilot programs. I look forward to continuing to work collaboratively with all of you and to welcoming our incoming CEO, Sean Donaghy, as we support and further the district's mission and vision to achieve our strategic goals and objectives, to explore creative and innovative ways to improve transit equity, sustainability, ridership, perceived value, and to continually improve our employee and customer experience. So thank you all for your support. Let's have a great 2024. The next item on the agenda is item 16, and it's an overview of the capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2025 to 2029. Yoon, you almost got away. You probably just should have stayed there. So welcome back, and thank you for coming to present this item.
Good afternoon, board members. I'll be presenting the proposed capital program for the district for the upcoming fiscal year 2025, as well as the unconstrained and constrained capital program for the next 5 years. Just to provide a quick background, the development of the capital program is an annual process. It is a district-wide effort to capture all the capital needs for the district in the next year and the next 5 years. It requires project managers to submit ideas and develop projects that they feel or are the needs for the district in the next 5 years. One of the things I do want to point out is that because project needs always exceed funding that's available, the CIP that's ultimately approved by the board are the projects that can be funded with known funds. So it is constrained, meaning that our capital needs will exceed much more than what we can actually fund through our needs. So the CIP is constrained. We have established as well a capital projects steering committee, which is composed of a working group of multiple chiefs from across the divisions across the district. And they are responsible for evaluating and ranking projects and determining which projects are the most critical that need funding for the next coming year. Next slide, please. There is multiple criteria that's used by the capital project steering committee to determine which projects are determined to be the most critical for the district. What I want to point out, it's here listed in this table, but to point out the criteria that ranks the highest are the state of repair projects, which means that we have assets reaching the end of their useful life. We also have projects that are ongoing, have already been previously funded by existing contracts. And we also have safety and security, and those are mandated by regulation. For example, positive train control. So those projects rank high within our priorities, and those are for the most part that make it within our constrained CIP. The approval that we are requesting for the board today is the initial approval, so we can program our NCD projects within the regional RTIP. That makes those projects eligible for programming with federal and state funds. We will be coming back to the board back in June when we request adoption for the operating budget. So there may be some changes in the CIP as we are going through the ongoing. There could be new projects that are determined to be priorities that maybe were not identified today. We also evaluate for project readiness, meaning that there's some projects that for some reason they are not ready to be advanced in the next coming fiscal year. There may be some deferrals or some change in funding. So the initial list of projects that we are requesting approval for today may have some revisions when we come back in June. All projects beyond the current year are subject to change. So the list of projects that are included in the fiscal year 2025 CIP are the ones that are going to be programmed in the RTIP. In this table, we are summarizing some of the strategic priorities that were identified in the last fiscal year budget and the current fiscal year, which is FY24. A lot of these priorities continue to be high priorities for the district, especially those related to improving the Sprinter fleet reliability, also making sure that we can enhance safety and security in our revenue vehicles and our facilities, and also secure funding for the key projects along the San Diego subdivision. Some of the major funding sources for the district and the drive on our proposed constraint CIP are Federal Transit Administration formula funds. Those are distributed to the San Diego region and then allocated 30% to NCTD and 70% to MTS. Which mirrors very closely the population in our service areas. We also have other funding that are discretionary in nature that we receive from the state, as well as the federal level, like the Federal Railroad Administration and some Federal Transit Administration discretionary grant programs as well. And TDA, Transportation Development Act, which is, those are flexible dollars that are derived from sales taxes. So for the most part, we utilize those funds for either operating expenses or to match some of our federal grants. New this year is going to be California Senate Bill 125. It's a transit program where the state reallocated some of the TRCP competitive funding to become more formula-based. So they, within the Budget Act of 2023, there's a pledge to reallocate TRCP funds of about $4 billion over the course of the next fiscal year to transit agencies in California that they have some is distributed based on a formula, and it can be used for some capital activities and some operating expenses. And I'm going to go into more detail what that funding is eligible for in the next slide. So NCTD through SANDAC is scheduled to receive approximately $96 million in SB 125 and approximately $16.5 million from the Zero Emission Transit Capital Program. The funding for this project has some restrictions, meaning that if funding is going to be used for capital projects, they have to both achieve a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, and they also have to demonstrate an increase in ridership. However, if there are some projects that previously received TRCP funding through the competitive process, they don't have to demonstrate these two criteria. There are two projects within our package that had previous TRCP funding that will be eligible to receive SB 125, and those are going to be the Del Mar Plus 5, as well as the San Diego double track phase 1 projects. The SB 125 funding also allows us to program some of the funding as a local match for FTA preventive maintenance expenses. Between SANDAC, on behalf of NCTD, we submitted an initial allocation package to the state back in December, proposing the use of these funds for the next 2 years for TRCP and the next 4 years for the ZETCP funds. In this table, we show that the district has capital needs of $585 million in the next 5 years. This is the unconstrained categories of the different capital needs for district. These are unconstrained capital needs, meaning that we don't have the funding to fund $585 million worth of projects. In the next third slide, you'll see what we call the constrained CIP, which means that we can only fund about 1/3 of our total capital needs. As you can see this pie chart, the biggest needs for the district in the 5 years in the next 5 years are concentrated in two big areas. They make almost 2/3 of our needs. Those are rail transit ways and lines, which are the right of way for the coaster and the sprinter corridor for the infrastructure, as well as funding for bus support equipment and facilities, with the majority of that need associated more specifically with the bus east and west master plan improvements. They make the majority of those bus needs. Now, this table, this is the one that shows what we can actually afford. So out of the $585 million, we have constrained our CIP to 155, which is the amount of funding that we have right now based on what we know from our different federal non-funding sources, what we can actually fund from our capital program. For this coming fiscal year 2025, we are proposing a CIP of $63.4 million. Like I mentioned earlier, the board will be approving the programming of those $63.4 million in an RTIP for FY24. For the 2024 RTIP, which is the fiscal year 2025. Anything beyond fiscal year 2025 is going to change. So when we come back next year with our new proposed CIP, this will likely change. As you can see, as time goes by, our constrained CIP is diminishing. And the reason that's diminishing is because we have a significant amount of funding coming for the next 2 years. Like I mentioned earlier, almost $97 million from the state. That's why you see the huge increase in spent in the next 2 years. But given that there's no more extra funding beyond FY27, then you can kind of see that our CIP starts falling because we don't have the funding available to fund more beyond what's, in this table at this point in time. Now, with that said, we also pursue discretionary grants. Mary Dover leads the discretionary grants program. So those are not included in here. So more dollars can become available as we start applying for more of those discretionary grants. This table summarizes where are most of our dollars going to be programmed for the next 5 years. With the largest investments going to be in the rail rolling stock, the rail right-of-way, and the rail station stops and terminals. Within the rail rolling stock, the vast majority of that spend is going to be concentrated on a sprinter fleet. And on the rails, transitway, and lines, the majority of that funding is associated with San Diego Double Track Phase 1. In the rail station stop and terminals, the majority of that funding is associated with the special events platform for Del Mar. So that will be San Diego Double Track Phase 2. This table provides the revenue estimates for the next 5 years from federal and non-federal funding sources. And because we have to have a constrained CIP, meaning that we have to program our capital projects based on what we know is our funding availability. We have used all these revenue sources to estimate how much dollars we have available for a capital program. So here, it's a recap in the next slide on where are most of our dollars going to be concentrated in the next 5 years. As I mentioned earlier, San Diego Double Track Phase 1, San Diego Double Track Phase 2, which includes the Fairgrounds platform and Del Mar Bluff stabilization, are going to be taking the majority of the funding from the new SB 125. For state repair projects, the majority of our spend is going to be concentrated on the Sprinter, which has $43 million program in the next 5 years for the overhaul of the Sprinter fleet. From state repair for maintenance of facilities, $7 million is the majority going to be going for a bus maintenance facilities improvements. That's really the largest category under maintenance of facilities. And on the right-of-way projects, the two large ones are going to be on the bridge repairs and replacement. These are state repair projects. For Bridge 257.2 and Bridge 209.9. Bridge 257.2, the SANDAG received a grant for that bridge. So that project is fully funded with NCD's additional contribution. And then we are also using $2.6 million for signals and communications improvements along the rail corridor. So to conclude my presentation, staff is recommending that the board approve the proposed fiscal year 2025 to fiscal year 2029 capital improvement program budget based on the estimated federal and non-federal funding levels provided in attachments 16A and 16B. Also forwarding a recommendation to the San Diego Association of Governments Board of Directors to approve the proposed fiscal year 2025 CIP as an attachment 16C and operating expenses in attachment 16B for inclusion in the 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, and approving that transit funds be used for operating expenses with a pledge that the district will expend the funds in compliance with the requirements of the transit ordinance and expenditure plans. That concludes my presentation, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you. That was quite a bit of information, Yoon. Everyone, you got it all, right? Okay, before we move to any board questions or comments, Suhel, are there any public comments on this item?
No, Madam Chair, but if I may, Board Member Lee has joined the meeting. Board Member Lee, can you hear me?
Sure.
Can you please provide a statement regarding your remote participation?
Yes, thank you for having me remotely for today. Just wanted to share that under the provision of AB 2449 for Just Cause, I'm participating remotely today due to a childcare need. Just want to state for the record that there are no adults in the room with me. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, so at this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. Board members, questions, comments? Board Member Contreras?
Thank you so much for the presentation. I just have a quick question. When we're looking at the state of good repair right of way, the 2.6 million for rail signals and communication, what can we say that this will do to improve the on-time performance of our Sprinter and Coaster?
So what I do want to point out that this is a program of new funding sources because we already have existing projects. The district currently is in the process of, we have already finished, I think maybe phase 1, but we received TRCP funding as well as Federal Railroad Administration funding. I think it's a total project budget of $35 to $38 million for signal modernization along the Lausanne corridor. So that's an ongoing project. So these are an additional funding that we're programming for new projects, not existing projects. So it looks small, but we already have a large project ongoing here currently at the district. We also received last year, thank you to Mary, about $7 million from the FTA for signal modernization for the Sprinter corridor. So that fund is not included here because those all were already programmed in prior years.
So the 2.6 million is for
New dollars that are coming in fiscal year 2025 for brand new projects.
okay, on both lines, or
So
is this just one?
the
line?
majority of that is going to go on the coastal corridor. There's
Okay.
some turnout replacements that we have to fix. So these are small, it's more like smaller state of repair projects. But the large project, which is associated with a signal modernization that has been ongoing for, I think, almost 2 years.
Right, and we received some funding from Congressman Mike Levin.
Yeah, those
for
were,
that as
yeah,
as
the
well.
$7 million for the Sprinter signal modernization. Yes, that is correct.
So in total, ballpark figure, what was the amount again that we have for modernizing our signals and communication?
So for the coaster, I think it's a budget of $35 million that combines both FRA, TRCP, and some of our own local match. And then for the Sprinter, we have not started that project yet. We are working with the Federal Transit Administration to clear the environmental requirements. So once that cleared, then we apply the funding. It is meant to fund for the most part, bringing the project from 30% to 100% design. And then when we think that there's going to be some project savings that we could probably implement on a phase approach. My last recollection is to modernize the entire Sprinter corridor is upwards of $50 million. Right? Yeah. Right. Right, Jay, but it's so this is just, a starting point. Oftentimes, what we have seen, there's more funding available for construction than for design. So I think that having the design started makes us eligible to potentially pursue construction funding.
So we're just trying to get much more competitive for that type of funding by
Yeah.
creating the design.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just seeing if
Yeah.
someone could speak to the on-time performances, that's one of our, goals here at NCTD, and how this fits into that.
So, Board Member Contreras, you pulled item 3 or item 12, which is the OT, I'm sorry. Board Member Jenkins pulled the OTP item. Could that be answered at that time? Or is
Sure.
this specific?
Sure, yeah, just because I'm wondering about the 2.6 million and how much more that we need. So, I mean, it could go with that item or, we could do it now.
Yeah, so we do, so Chris will discuss our on-time performance as it stands now. We do have a couple projects in the pipeline to improve on-time performance, including the signal modernization. And then also the double tracking projects on both the Sprinter and the Coaster Corridor. We have $100 million for the San Diego project so far. As you mentioned, with the SB 125 funding, we're trying to increase the amount of funding that we have for that. Sandag also received funding for the Bataquitos Lagoon project. Those two will be critical to decrease the amount of single track. So when Amtrak has a delay or when, we have a delay, it won't cause cascading delays. So some of those projects, the need is still upwards of hundreds of millions of dollars to complete double tracking of the entire corridor. But it's ours and Sandag's priority to advance those projects.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to try to connect all the dots here, but I really appreciate what we're doing and look forward to advocating for more millions of dollars so that we can get this done. Thanks.
Thank you. Board Member Jenkins.
You had mentioned, I think, a couple times about some of this is based on allocation. Is that still the 70 that North County Transit gets about 70% and MTS gets 30, or are you talking about a different allocation?
It's the same allocation. So Federal Transit Administration formula TD and Transit are regional at a regional level. And within the two transit agencies, which is NCT MTS, and which closely mirrors our populations in our service areas, NCT receives 30% of Federal Transit Administration, Transit, and TDA. And to some extent, STA as well,
Did
State
you
Transit
say
Assistance,
NCTD receives 30,
30%,
30, and MTS
70%.
70. Is that ever periodically reevaluated to see if that percentage should be changed?
So the California Department of Finance comes with population estimates every year. Sandag does also some of their estimates, and it is pretty close. The last estimate was NCTD at 29% population for the region. So I would say it's pretty close to reality. So it is around 30%.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Hensy?
Yeah, just a clarification. On the bridge projects, I know, as Mary mentioned, and we're really excited about the Bataquitos Bridge replacement project. And then in the presentation, they're listed by numbers, the 257.2 and bridge 209.9. Are those other bridges? Do you happen to know which ones those are? I think one was like Santa
Yeah,
Margarita.
so 209 will be in the city of Oceanside.
Okay.
And then 257.2 is in Rose Canyon.
Okay, thank you for that reminder.
Okay, perfect. No other questions? Okay, well, thank you both, Mary, for joining you at the dais here. May I have a motion to approve agenda item number 16?
I'll move to approve staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Motion by Contreras. Second by Jenkins. Please call the vote.
Board Chair Edson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Patel,
Yes.
Board Member Martinez,
Yes.
Board Member Hensy,
Yes.
Board Member Garcia,
Aye.
Board Member Robinson,
Yes.
Board Member Desmond, Board Member Jenkins,
Yes.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
On the motion of Board Member Contreras, seconded by Board Member Jenkins to approve the FY 2025 through 2029 Capital Improvement Program. Motion passes. Board Member Desmond absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we move on to the Executive Director's Report, we will circle back to item 12 and item 3. Item 12 was pulled by Board Member Contreras, and it has to do with the on-call security service. So I'm seeing Karen Tulsky. Yes, Chief. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay.
Presentation?
Board, do you need a formal presentation on this, or do you just have a question or two?
You know what? I think that this is such a critical item for NCTD, and I really would love to have a full presentation. So thank you.
All right.
It's all queued up and ready to go. Thank you.
Let us begin. Thank you. Good afternoon, board members. Happy New Year. Starting out with just a brief background on our security model, as a refresher for those who are here for a few years and those who are new. Our direct staffing consists of our manager and assistant manager of security. We also have 9 control center technicians. Their job is to handle the 24/7 closed circuit TV monitoring center and do incident support from the phones in terms of law enforcement and phone calls. We are also budgeted for 6 code compliance inspectors who are out in the field doing ordinance support, both at stations and on board our modes of service. In addition, we have an MOU with the San Diego Sheriff's Department, which gives us 1 full-time sergeant and 10 full-time deputies. They are the ones who handle the more law enforcement related activities, dealing with crimes that occur on the system, trespassing along the right of way, those types of activities that are more appropriate for law enforcement to be addressing versus our code compliance inspectors. Slide. Based on our security data that we've been seeing over the prior 12 to 24 months, at the end of FY23, NCTD did implement a pilot on-call security program. That program has been primarily focused on deploying on-call security officers for field posts at our high priority transit centers, as well as having them out for specialty events such as riding the Padres trains, working the stations for holiday trains, and those types of activities. Slide. While that pilot program was in place, we also entered into a solicitation for a longer-term on-call security service firm. That proposal that we received and are recommending from Intercon Services as our recommended vendor includes both unarmed and armed services. And I want to really stress that we are not proposing that we move into armed services at this time or anytime in the near future, but we did want to leave that in there as an option. Intercon is they're a large firm. They have, as you can see, over 50 years in business, and they have significant transit expertise working here locally as in San Diego down at MTS, as well as with other organizations such as DART. The plan for this long-term security agreement is to build on the pilot program that we started. We would be expanding our fixed post patrols in terms of both the numbers of hours per day that we are doing them, as well as the locations at which they are being performed. That would also give us the opportunity with this enhanced contract to provide more field support out on the modes of service, supporting our customers and our employees. And then the recommendation that you can see here would be to award the agreement to Intercon Security Services for the 3-year base term, as well as 3 optional 1-year terms for a total not to exceed amount of $4.5 million. And again, these are on-call services. So those budget amounts, we're not necessarily obligated to spend a certain amount each year. It is on call. We would be working as we need to within those budget amounts based on what the data and the incidents are that are seeing and experiencing out in our system. And that concludes my presentation.
I believe that there are some questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation. This is a conversation that I had offline, but I just want to bring it into the public record. I just want to ensure that Intercon Security Services is very well trained in de-escalation. And I say this not because in general that's a good practice, but I happen to have been on the Sprinter a few months ago here at Oceanside Transit Center. And I did personally witness an escalation occur with the security. And, I was able to speak to one of our employees. I spoke to the individual who, was in this kind of verbal altercation with security. It was regarding a passenger who looked like they had like construction work uniform on. They were totally passed out on the train, and there was an attempt to remove them. However, they were just totally like not moving or anything like that, right? It looked like he was just totally passed out. Understanding that that's not a good situation. However, it was a relatively peaceful situation until the security services were called in. And that's where it started becoming an escalation with this other individual that was trying to, in his mind, protect this individual that was, not verbally complying. So because I witnessed this escalation, I want to ensure that that's not something that we're going to see, and that folks that are going to be doing our security services would be, leaning more towards the de-escalation practices than continuing to, verbally escalate the situation with someone who's, a passenger. So I just want to see if there's some kind of reassurance that with this contract, we are going to be able to tell the public we can ensure that the security service is going to be providing the best service, and they are very well trained in de-escalation. I have an answer for that. Thank you to Chris Orlando and to Mary. But I just want that to be part of the public record. If you could tell me what it is that we are going to be seeing as far as de-escalation.
Yeah, absolutely. And totally appreciate the difficulty of that situation that I'm sure are presented all around, not just for the individuals involved, but for other passengers who are members of the public who were there. So yes, we do take de-escalation and customer service training very, very seriously. One of the components of the scope of work is that within 30 days of NTP notice to proceed, the selected vendor will be providing us with a proposed training plan. And the proposed training plan that they have to provide has multiple elements, which de-escalation is included among them, as well as customer service and other types of items. One of the other components of the training plan that will kind of be falling on us here at NCTD are the things that we need to train them on. Obviously, we will be the ones training them on our ordinances and on our system and on what what our expectations are for those types of items. So developing that training program overall is a partnership between us and the selected vendor. As far as de-escalation, we have an agreement through the sheriffs where they have been providing de-escalation training to all of our employees here currently at NCTD who are out in the field, out anywhere dealing with the public, as well as all of the MV employees, the bus operators who are out there as well. So we would also be having the on-call security firm be sending their individuals through. I think one of the other things that will stand out more about this long-term agreement that is somewhat different than the pilot program. The pilot program is a short-term agreement, and we have not been able to see the consistency in the staffing of the officers that are assigned under that temporary short-term agreement, because it's a much smaller agreement in scope and scale. And so the availability of different officers to come out is a bit more flexible than it will be under the long-term agreement, where we really are going to be expecting them to have these same individuals working on our system anytime that we are calling them. And that is the whole point of the training plan as well. Can't put somebody through a robust training plan if you're giving them a call that morning and saying, go show up at NCTD. So that is one of the things that we are looking for, is that stability in the staffing that we're going to be seeing from these officers, and as our engagement in the training program, and we will be participating and observing them as well. Chris and Todd, our security manager and assistant manager, will be out in the field. They will be observing as well. So I really do believe that we can provide the public with that assurance that we are going to be placing the service, the de-escalation, the safety and security, all of those things that the public are looking for as our top priority as we move forward, with this agreement, if it is approved. Definitely agree, that it is important. When we were on the source selection committee and we were going through the review process, we conducted interviews with the top firms. We didn't just review their proposals. We actually conducted interviews with them and really dug into a lot of these types of questions to see how they were answered by the firms, getting a sense of how they will deal with a lot of these top priority issues that we see out in the system and that we are looking for them to help us with.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And one last question that I have, since there's going to be a plan brought forth by Intercon Security Services regarding some of this training and de-escalation, is that information going to be made available to the board? Or is that something that we will review on the MISBTA committee?
So generally speaking, when we get plans from vendors under these types of agreements, they're not items that are generally brought up to the board or to the board committees for review and approval. Certainly, as we are moving forward, if there's an interest, I think maybe at MISBTA, we could certainly, bring in briefing and share information on, the program itself and the training that is a part of it. But as far as just like the standalone plan document, that wouldn't generally be something that we would just put forth. That would be something staff would be working on.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, as a concept, I want to continue to review this. It's critically important that we have a multitude of tools when it comes to security. And I really appreciate that NCTD is working towards that. It's something that, we all hear from folks in the service area, right, that are our customers, that they want to continue to see more security, especially as we continue the Youth Opportunity Pass. We see that ridership grow. It's critical that we do have security. I just want to ensure that we minimize escalating when possible, because not only was I delayed with an unnecessary escalation, but folks that were riding the Sprinter at that time were a little bit startled. I went up and I ended up talking to the individual and I spoke to our employee and had really good conversations. But not everybody's like that. So
Agree. Yeah, and we are absolutely anti-escalation.
right.
We
Perfect.
preach de-escalation at all times, and we are completely anti-escalation, and our posture will not change.
Awesome. Thank you. And with that, I'll go ahead and move this recommendation.
Did you want to also comment on this item, Board Member Jenkins?
I have a couple of questions. How long was the pilot program?
The pilot program started at the end of fiscal 2023. It is a short-term agreement that is in place through June of 2024, which is this year. And that allows us time to have the proposed agreement, if it is so approved, mobilize. So the pilot program would continue and we'd be able to use them while the long-term agreement is mobilizing, and we are getting all of these elements set up, like their training plan, like their hiring of the employees, their onboarding, developing deployment plans, all those types of
Okay,
things.
so it really just started.
6-7 months ago,
Okay.
correct.
And then I think there was mention it's a 3-year base term. If this program isn't going as anticipated, do we have the option to get out before the 3 years?
All of our agreements have termination for convenience clause, and I'm gonna roll my eyes back at Mr. Wellung, and he's nodding his head at me, our procurement manager, yes.
Okay, and then so you mentioned it was on-call service. So I'm trying to envision what that looks like. And this might be down in the weeds, sorry guys, but I'm trying to envision. So a situation's happening. Where are they gonna call and how long is it gonna take this team to get there? Or
So
what
the
does that mean?
on-call service agreement simply means that we are not setting up an agreement where we are promising them 40 hours a week per person for X number of people. So it may mean that 1 month we utilize 5 people, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm making it up. The next month it's less or it's more, or we have some folks that are called in for extra duty just for the
Okay.
Holiday Express or Padres trains, things like that. It's just not permanent, fixed guarantee of set hours per week or
Okay.
per month.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I think you mentioned it was $4.5 million. So if this program is not working, I think those of us who contract with the sheriff's pay, I don't know, it's 250 per deputy or $1,000 per deputy. Would we reevaluate if maybe instead of this sort of service, we would maybe add deputies? Because that's a lot of money to add.
It is a lot of money, and it sounds like a lot, but when you compare it to what you do pay for the deputies
right.
versus the hours, you get more out of the on-call security.
Okay.
And not opposed. I would have deputies all over the place if I could. But because they have multifaceted things that they can do, and they are, they have all sorts of specialized training, and our group is just phenomenal. They have the best customer service of any law enforcement I've ever seen. But, that MOU is something that is again specific to the district in San Diego Sheriff's Office. Law enforcement is having a tremendously difficult time hiring.
Right.
So even the additional deputies that the both of our boards approved a couple of years ago, they're still trying to recruit for the last two because those are headcount adds to the sheriff's department as a whole. So
Okay.
yes, you could consider it, but we're also still somewhat, constrained within what the availabilities of law enforcement resources are. And obviously, I think other cities are probably trying to ramp up their law enforcement support through the SDSO as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great questions. Thank you for the presentation, Chief Tucholsky. And we will move now to item 3. Oh, I'm so sorry. Would you like to move approval of that item?
Yes, I think I'm just waiting for a second.
Motion by Contreras, second by Jenkins. Please call the vote.
Board Chair Edson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Patel. Yes. Board Member Martinez,
Yes.
Board Member Hensy,
Yes.
Board Member Garcia,
Aye.
Board Member Robinson,
Yes.
Board Member Desmond, Board Member Jenkins,
Yes.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
On the motion of Board Member.
Excuse me, Board Member Lee. Never mind.
Thank you. On the motion of Board Member Contreras, seconded by Board Member Jenkins, to award agreement 32625 to Intercon Security Systems for on-call security services. Motion passes. Board Member Desmond absent.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we will move to item 3, which is the monthly transit operations performance report for November 2023. And I see Chris Orlando, our Chief Chris, has come to the podium. Or aren't you Chief Chris at this point? I don't know.
Okay, yes, my questions, a couple comments and questions. As we looked over the system-wide performance and the performance on each of our modes, it was a good thing we had increases since 2022. We're still behind our pre-COVID levels. So just comment about that. I know we're working on that. But I think also a good thing to point out is our Youth Opportunity Pass increased almost 40% over last year. So that was huge. But my questions, and I think I brought this up last month. And so, again, as you look at the attachment we were given with the different red, green, et cetera, it looked like there was a little bit of movement to the negative in a couple areas on the coaster and the flex. And so again, what are we going to be doing to try to improve this performance over the year coming up?
So the red you're seeing in the coaster ridership is a function of a couple things. So those numbers you see in the middle column are variance to budget. So the budget is driven by our service implementation plan, which is an estimate of ridership that we do each year in conjunction with the budget. You'll note the far right column is the prior year. And as you noted, we actually had increases to the prior year. So the red you're seeing in the ridership are to the budget. And to the budget means to the service implementation plan. So a couple of things going on here. One, you'll recall last month I mentioned the Padres and the lack of ridership in October because of not having the playoffs. And so when the SIP was put together for this fiscal year, the quarterly ridership in that quarter was higher based on the Padres making the playoffs. And so the negative variances you see to the budget here reflect that the ridership for that quarter was inflated in the prior fiscal year due to the Padres. So we've recognized this variance and it's a result of the quarterly way the ridership estimates are done within the SIP. And so we're going to take a look at making sure the seasonality is accounted for in the budgeting process. You called out, which I think is the critical number, that we are having year-over-year increases in ridership on the coaster. And so that's the positive number. They're incremental increases, but we're going in the right direction. And that's really where we're focused.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Is that all? Board Member Contreras, do you have a question or?
Yes, I do. I have a comment and I really appreciate Board Member Jenkins pulling this item. We in the data captured for November 2023, we were still not at the same frequency that we were pre-COVID. Is that correct?
In terms of the breeze service?
In terms of all of it?
No.
If you could just give us a kind of like.
Yeah, no, we're still not at the frequencies we were at pre-COVID, and we've increased frequency on the coaster. And as you know, as we talked about in the last meeting, the increases in the service recovery on the breeze will be effective in June.
Okay, so I think that's really a target, right, where we can start seeing apples to apples comparison, because with less frequency, it just becomes a less reliable system. And also with mechanical breakdowns, right? That's why I was asking the question about the signal modernization, because some of our not on-time performance has to do with both the mechanical issues and the signals just, I guess, being so old that it doesn't work out. So I'm really happy to see continued growth, but I think we'll come to a juncture where we are able to see these apples to apples comparison of pre-COVID to current when we get those frequencies back up. And then from there, it will give, I would say it would give the board a really good platform to have a dynamic discussion about where we're at and how we improve ridership.
Yeah.
So, but I really appreciate you pulling this so we could have a little bit of that conversation now. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve item 3?
I'll move to approve item 3.
Contreras, second.
Motion by Jenkins, second by Contreras. They're just flip-flopping, you know.
Board Chair Edson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Patel,
Yes.
Board Member Martinez,
Yes.
Board Member Hensy,
Yes.
Board Member Garcia,
Aye.
Board Member Robinson,
Yes.
Board Member Desmond, Board Member Jenkins,
Yes.
Board Member Contreras.
Aye.
On the motion of Board Member Jenkins, seconded by Board Member Contreras to receive the monthly transit operations performance report for November 2023. Motion passes. Board Member Desmond absent.
Thank you. This brings us to the Executive Director's report and light. Thank you for the light. Mr. Ballard, do you have anything to share?
You know, I always talk, why are we in the dark in these meetings? And, you know, and I write out some bullet points I remember to say, and I'm sitting here and obviously Lori saw that I was having trouble even seeing them in the dark. So thank you. And thank you. So my report is very brief. But yes, exactly. So Happy New Year, first of all, to everyone. Happy to be here again. And it's hard to believe we've had 3 holidays since we got together last. We had Christmas, we had New Year's, we had the MLK birthday. And so I think that the staff here, the hardworking staff, took advantage of that to get some time off and work on their work-life balance. And to spend time with family and recharging the batteries. And so everyone is back, and everybody has got a lot of work done. You can see from all the action items today that, you know, people aren't just sitting back. I mean, there's a lot of work that continues to go on. But we are working full speed on the agency's issues. Some of the things that we have accomplished over the last month is we've continued our recruiting efforts for a number of the top positions that are vacant. We are actually bringing in our number one candidate for the chief mechanical officer for rail next week. We have a really outstanding candidate that we really hope to attract and retain. We are continuing to, we've done interviews on the chief operating officer for rail, and we've got a couple of top candidates there. We also have top positions in both procurement and HR that we are doing the interviews. We've got several scheduled this week. So we're spending a lot of time in building up the team. But I do want to point out that we're working very closely with Sean Donaghy. That basically, these are some direct reports, and he is in the middle of these. So we're making sure that we're recruiting people that he gets a chance to talk to, that he is supportive of. And so just to give him, you know, when he hits the ground on March 1st, you know, he's going to have as many people that he can work with as possible. And these will be people that he approved and interviewed. And so that's very important. We're also continuing to work hard on managing our consultants and contractors. And as you know, we have a number of them who help the district move forward. And our staff is getting better and better and sharper on how we do manage our consultants and contractors. It's a lot of money, and it's very important that we get what we pay for when we hire these folks. And other things that we've been working on, we've had a class of our supervisor training academy, which is really critical for the future success of the agency. When we talk about how our employees interact with our customers, it comes back to the training, and it comes back to the people who are supervising our frontline employees, and are they supporting the frontline people properly? So I've been active with the current supervisor training academy. Spoke to them last month, and we'll be having our next graduation ceremony on February 6th. Anyone's interested, you're more than welcome to come. It's right here in town. It's a good group, it's a good program, and I think you'll see more emphasis in the future as we do that, as well as a mentoring program to help us better identify folks who are already on staff that we can promote and bring up within the organization, in addition to recruiting from outside. So as I said, I'm working very closely with Sean Donaghy. I mean, our transition is going on now. I mean, it's you know, he and I have worked together before. We know each other. We're communicating regularly, and so he's becoming very, very familiar with what's going on here. So moving forward, Yoon has the budget kickoff scheduled for Tuesday for fiscal year 25. And our fiscal year, of course, starts July 1 of each year. And so we'll be putting a lot of time into that. She's already put, and we've already had a number of meetings on the capital side, as you saw from the discussion earlier today. But for my final month, which is going to be next month, in addition to working on the budget and continuing the businesses, I'll be focusing my attention on the transition and making sure that come March 1, he hits the ground running. And that, Madam Chair, is the sum of my report for this month. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so one of the items that we approved on consent was the committee assignments, both internal and external. And so internally we have PATH and MISPEDA. And my understanding is that our illustrious clerk will be sending out kind of doodle polls to the groups to try to figure out what days are best, but also that PATH, the target is for a March meeting, and for MISPEDA, an April meeting. Is that correct?
And Madam Chair, you're blowing the minds of our new members because they have no idea what these initials stand for. We will work on a glossary of terms and abbreviations so that, you know, I have to stop and ask frequently, okay, what does that one mean? And so don't feel like you're supposed to know this, you're not, but we'll put together a glossary for you so you'll know what we're talking about.
Were you guys confused? Did I lose you? I'm sorry if I did.
When I first heard about Mizbida, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm on Sibiribra or something. I never knew, I had no idea what it was, but I was on it. So I came. It was wonderful.
Marketing
it would
service,
be-
yeah,
it would-
marketing, service planning and business development.
I learned
And
that eventually, but
That's easy for you to say.
yeah.
well, having served on both of those committees to me and been here for a long time, I apologize for the acronym use. Thanks for pointing that out. And do board members have anything brief to report? No? Board member Jenkins?
I have just a comment. As I was driving over here today, I was thinking about that we have several new members. And one of the things that we did, and we're gonna have our new CEO and maybe other people along the way here soon. One of the things that we did years ago, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID,
Yeah.
is staff organized a tour for the board and took the board to our east facility in Escondido and to our facility in Oceanside. And seeing it really makes a big difference. And so I'm wondering if at some point during the year, it might be helpful to do that again, because as I'm looking around, Jewel, you and I might have, maybe Priya, might have been the only ones that had done that. And maybe it's a combination of a sprinter and a bus. I know we took a bus and went all around, but maybe it's a sprinter and a bus for part of it. But it was very enlightening to see what happens with the boots on the ground people.
Madam
So
Chair,
I'm
may I respond?
Yes.
We are organizing a board orientation for when Sean Donahue is here. And we can actually discuss a tour perhaps later in the year. This was deferred for this year, just because of the transition of our new executive director or former. And we are going to be talking about that in March.
Okay, good. I think that would be helpful.
Yes, I've actually had the conversation with staff, and that's why I think it's vitally important, because we have such a young board again, that we do some sort of an orientation as well as the tour, because they're very beneficial.
Yeah.
You know, hard to do your job if you haven't seen all of it, right? So those components are important. So thank you very much for bringing it up.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, nothing else from anyone? Suhail, do we have any remaining public speakers?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, at this time, registration to speak on non-agenda public communications has ended. Before we adjourn today, I want to take a moment to honor 2 members of our NCTD family who recently passed away. Al Hernandez, who was warmly known as Big Al, served the district as a bus operator for 7 years. Al's friends and colleagues have shared that his love for people, for life and food made him a very special guy, that Al's nature was perpetually positive, and that he had a generous spirit and just loved to make people laugh. I'd also like to acknowledge Jill McNaughton. Prior to her retirement, Jill was the district's clerk of the board for 14 years. While I did not have the pleasure of working with Jill, I understand that she was well known for spreading joy throughout the workplace with her notoriously infectious laugh. After retiring, Jill spent her time traveling the world and enjoying time with her grandson. Both Al and Jill will be missed by many here at NCTD, so I'd like to adjourn this meeting in honor of both Al Hernandez and Jill McNaughton. Thank you all. Our next scheduled meeting will be the regular board meeting on February 15th, 2024 at 2 p.m. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, Board Member Lee.